Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Endeavour, staring at the massive alien vessel that blocked their path. The ship was dark gray, covered in spikes and armor plating that made it look more like a weapon than a spacecraft. It was 3 times larger than the Endeavour and radiated an aura of pure menace. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Communications Officer Pete Wilson, his voice shaking slightly. "Put it on screen," Jake replied calmly. The view screen flickered to life, showing a creature that made everyone on the bridge take a step back. The alien was enormous, easily 12 feet tall, with a thick exoskeleton that looked harder than steel. Its face was angular and fierce, with glowing red eyes and rows of sharp teeth. 4 powerful arms extended from its broad shoulders, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. "I am War Commander Vexstar of the Krillian Empire." The creature spoke in a deep, rumbling voice that seemed to shake the ship itself. "You have entered our sacred space without permission. Your ship will surrender immediately or be destroyed." The bridge crew looked at their captain, expecting him to order a retreat. The Krillians were legendary throughout the galaxy as the most feared warriors in existence. Their home planet was so dangerous that no other species could even survive on its surface. They conquered entire star systems with ease, and their warriors were said to be unstoppable in combat. But Jake Morrison did something that surprised everyone, including the Krillian commander. He smiled. "War Commander Vexstar, I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Endeavour. Come in peace and mean no harm to your empire. In fact, we'd be honored to meet with you properly. Would you like to come aboard our ship for dinner and diplomatic talks?" The silence that followed was deafening. Vexstar's red eyes widened in what could only be described as shock. In 3,000 years of Krillian expansion across the galaxy, no species had ever invited them to dinner when faced with their war fleet. "You ... invite us to eat with you?" Vexstar asked, clearly confused. "Of course," Jake replied, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "First meetings should be civilized. We can learn about each other, share stories, maybe even become friends." The concept of friendship with other species was completely foreign to the Krillians. They knew only conquest, submission, or death. This human's proposal made no sense in their worldview. "Captain," whispered his first officer, "Commander Ron Davis, are you sure this is wise?" "The Krillians have never shown mercy to anyone." Jake turned to his crew with confidence in his eyes. "That's exactly why we need to try something different. Ron, fear and violence haven't worked for anyone else. Maybe it's time for a new approach." On the Krillian ship, Vexstar was having a heated discussion with his subordinates. "This makes no tactical sense," growled Sub-Commander Kralvex. "Should be begging for their lives or preparing for battle. Instead, they offer food and conversation." "It could be a trap," suggested another officer. Vexstar studied the human captain on his screen. The creature looked so fragile compared to a Krillian warrior. Soft pink skin, no natural armor, small teeth, weak-looking limbs. Yet there was something in his eyes that the war commander had never seen before when facing the Krillians. No fear. Only curiosity and genuine warmth. "I will accept this invitation," Vexstar decided. "But we go prepared for treachery." An hour later, Vexstar and 2 of his warriors materialized in the Endeavour's transporter room. The Krillians had to duck to fit through the doorways as Jake led them to the ship's dining hall. The human crew they passed along the way stared in awe and terror at the massive aliens. But none fled or showed hostile behavior. In the dining hall, Dr. Lisa Hamilton was waiting with her medical kit. It was a small woman with kind eyes and graying hair, and she immediately noticed that one of the Krillian warriors was favoring his left arm. "Excuse me," she said politely, approaching the injured warrior. "I'm Dr. Hamilton. It looks like you might be hurt. Would you like me to take a look at that arm?" The injured Krillian, whose name was Drakmar, instinctively raised his good arm to strike this presumptuous creature, but Vexstar stopped him with a gesture, curious to see what would happen. "You would heal an enemy?" Vexstar asked. Dr. Hamilton looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Enemy? We just met. Besides, you're hurt, and I'm a doctor. It's what I do." She gently examined Drakmar's arm. Her her touch careful and professional. The Krillian warrior had never experienced anything like this. Krillian society showing weakness meant death, and helping the weak was considered a waste of resources. It's just a minor fracture, Dr. Hamilton said after her examination. I can fix this easily if you'll let me. Drakmer looked to his commander, who nodded slowly. The doctor applied a medical device to the warrior's arm, and within minutes, the pain was gone. Drakmer flexed his arm experimentally, amazed that it was completely healed. Why? He asked in broken human language. Why help, Drakmer? Dr. Hamilton smiled warmly. Because you needed help, and I could provide it. That's reason enough. During dinner, the cultural differences became even more apparent. The humans asked questions about Krillian art, philosophy, and history. They seemed genuinely interested in learning about Krillian culture beyond their reputation as warriors. This was another completely foreign experience for Vexstar and his warriors. Tell us about your homeworld, Jake said as they ate. It's it like growing up on Krill Prime? Vexstar found himself describing the harsh gravity, the deadly storms, the predatory creatures that hunted even adult Krillians. He expected the humans to cower in fear at these descriptions, but instead, they listened with fascination. It sounds incredibly challenging, said Jake. Your people must be remarkably adaptable to thrive in such conditions. Thrive? Vexstar repeated. Many do not survive childhood. Only the strongest live to adulthood. What happens to those who aren't as physically strong? Asked Dr. Hamilton. They die, Vexstar replied matter-of-factly. It is the way of nature. The humans exchanged glances, and Vexstar could see sadness in their eyes. This was another puzzle. Why would they feel sorrow for weak creatures they had never met? As the evening progressed, the Krillians began to observe other strange human behaviors. The crew members helped each other with tasks even when not ordered to do so. They shared their food freely and seemed to care about each other's well-being. Most puzzling of all, they treated their captain with respect rather than fear. And he led them through inspiration rather than intimidation. When it came time for the Krillians to leave, Vexstar found himself reluctant to end the encounter. These humans had shown him concepts he had never imagined: kindness without weakness, strength without cruelty, leadership through trust rather than fear. We will report this meeting to our high command, Vexstar announced as they prepared to depart. We hope to meet again soon, Jake replied, extending his hand in the human gesture of friendship. Vexstar stared at the offered hand for a long moment before carefully grasping it with one of his massive claws, being careful not to crush the fragile human appendage. As the Krillian ship departed, Vexstar stood in his command center, his mind racing with new thoughts. These humans were like nothing the Krillian Empire had ever encountered. They were weak by Krillian standards, yet they possessed a different kind of strength, one that came from caring for others rather than dominating them. For the first time in his long military career, War Commander Vexstar began to question everything. He had been taught about strength, weakness, and what it truly meant to be powerful. War Commander Vexstar stood before the massive crystal screen in the High Command Chamber on Krill Prime. The chamber was carved from solid rock deep within the planet's core, where the gravity was so intense that most alien species would be crushed instantly. Round him, the most powerful Krillians in the Empire listened to his report about the strange encounter with humans. High Matriarch Korvatha towered above them all, her ancient exoskeleton scarred from countless battles. She was over 800 years old and had conquered more star systems than any Krillian in history. Her forearms ended in claws that had personally killed thousands of enemies. These humans invited you to eat with them? She asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. Yes, High Matriarch, Vexstar replied. They showed no fear when faced with our war fleet. Instead, they offered friendship and healing to our wounded. Healing enemies is weakness, growled Battlelord Dexkar, slamming his massive fist on the stone table. They mock our strength with such pathetic behavior. Perhaps, said Vexstar carefully, but their behavior was unlike anything in our databases. They possess technology equal to ours, yet they choose cooperation over conquest. High Matriarch Korvatha studied the recorded images of the humans that Vextar had brought back. They looked so fragile, so weak. Their skin was soft and easily damaged. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no visible strength. Yet something about them troubled her. We must test their resolve, she decided. If they truly are as weak as they appear, they will make useful slaves. Send the 4th Battle Fleet to one of their outer colonies. We will see how these humans fight when their lives are at stake. Meanwhile, on the human colony world of New Haven, life continued peacefully. The colony was home to 50,000 settlers who had come from Earth to start new lives among the stars. They grew crops, raised families, and built communities far from the crowded cities of their home world. Colonial. Administrator Ben Parker was reviewing supply reports in his office when the emergency alerts began screaming. His assistant, Jenny Walsh, burst through the door with terror in her eyes. "Ben, we've got massive ships appearing in orbit. They're not responding to our communications, and they're launching attack craft." Ben rushed to the command center, where the colony's small defense team was already mobilizing. On the main screen, he could see the Krillian battle fleet descending toward their world like metal storms of destruction. "Get me a channel to all colonists," Ben ordered. "Emergency evacuation protocol is now in effect. All civilians are to report to the underground shelters immediately." But even as he gave the orders, Ben knew their small defense force couldn't hold off a Krillian assault. They had 12 security officers and some basic weapons meant for dealing with wild animals, not galactic conquerors, in the farming district. Steve Murphy was working in his wheat fields when he saw the alien ship screaming overhead. His neighbor, Mary Johnson, came running from her greenhouse with her 3 children. "Steve, what are those ships?" she shouted over the noise of the alien engines. "Nothing good," Steve replied grimly. He had served in Earth's military before becoming a farmer, and he recognized warships when he saw them. "Get your kids to the shelter. I'll help with the evacuation." But Mary shook her head. "My oldest Tommy is still at school on the other side of town. I have to get him." "Mary, it's too dangerous," Steve protested. "He's my son," Mary said simply. "I won't leave him behind." Steve watched her drive off toward the school, then looked at his own farmhouse where his wife and elderly father were waiting. He could take them to safety, or he could help other families who might not make it on their own. The choice was easy for him. "Dad, take Susan to the shelter," he called to his father. "I'll be right behind you," instead of following them. Steve grabbed his hunting rifle and headed toward town to help with the evacuation. The Krillian assault began with precision strikes on the colony's communication arrays and power stations. War Commander Drakel, leading the attack, expected immediate surrender or chaotic flight. What he found instead confused him greatly. The humans did flee, but not in panic. They moved in organized groups, helping the elderly and carrying children. He watched through his tactical display as human adults placed themselves between the attacking forces and the weaker members of their community. In the colony school, teacher Kate Williams was leading 30 children to the emergency shelter when a Krillian drop pod crashed through the roof. The massive alien warrior that emerged stood twice as tall as any human, his armor gleaming and weapons ready. The children screamed and cowered behind Kate, but she stepped forward to face the alien warrior. "Please," she said, her voice shaking, but determined. "These are just children. They can't hurt you. Let them go to safety." The Krillian warrior, Sub-Commander Kraldev, stared down at this tiny human female who dared to stand between him and his prey. In Krillian culture, the weak were left behind to die. Yet this fragile creature was willing to face death to protect young ones that weren't even her own offspring. "Move aside, human," Kraldev ordered, "or die with them." Kate Williams spread her arms wide, shielding as many children as she could. "No, if you want to hurt them, you'll have to go through me first." Kraldev raised his weapon, then hesitated. Something about this display of selfless courage troubled him. On Krill Prime, adults fought only for themselves and their own bloodline. This behavior made no tactical sense. Across the colony, similar scenes played out. Security Chief Amy Rodriguez and her small team fought desperately not to win, but to buy time for civilians to escape. When 3 of her officers were wounded and captured, Amy refused to abandon them. I'm not leaving my people behind, she told her remaining officers. We go back for them. Chief, that's suicide, protested Officer Mark Davis. There's too many of them. Maybe, Amy replied, checking her weapon. But they're counting on us. We don't abandon family. The Krillians watched in amazement as this tiny human security force launched a rescue mission against impossible odds. They succeeded in freeing 2 of the captured officers, though Amy herself was wounded in the process. When Krillian medics arrived to treat their own wounded, they found human colonists trying to help injured Krillian soldiers. Dr. Helen Foster, the colony's only doctor, was attempting to treat a Krillian warrior who had been hurt in a building collapse. Get away from me, human, the warrior snarled weakly. I'm a doctor, Helen replied calmly, continuing her examination. You have internal bleeding. If I don't help you, you'll die. Why would you save enemy? Helen looked up at him with gentle eyes. 'Cause you're hurt, and I can help. That's all that matters to me. The warrior stared at her in shock. Even his own kind would have left him to die if he couldn't fight anymore. Yet this human enemy was risking her life to save his. By the end of the battle, New Haven had fallen. To the Krillians, as expected, but War Commander Draketow found himself deeply troubled by what he had witnessed. The humans had fought bravely, but more than that, they had consistently chosen to protect others, even at the cost of their own lives. In his report to High Command, Draketow struggled to explain what he had seen. Humans fought not for conquest or glory, he wrote, but for each other. They sacrificed themselves for the weak, the young, and even for strangers. Their warriors died protecting those who could not fight. High Matriarch Korvatha read the report with growing unease. The Krillians had won the battle easily, as predicted. But the human behavior described in the report challenged everything the Krillian Empire believed about strength and survival. Send scouts to observe more human colonies, she commanded. I want to understand these creatures better before we proceed with full conquest. But already word of human courage and compassion was spreading through the Krillian ranks. Young warriors like Taishka began asking questions that had never been asked before. What if there were different kinds of strength? What if protecting others was not weakness, but the greatest power of all? Dr. Lisa Hamilton stepped off the transport shuttle onto the surface of Krill Prime, the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. The gravity was crushing. It's 3 times heavier than Earth. The air was thick and poisonous to most species, requiring her to wear a full environmental suit. In the distance, she could see massive predators hunting in packs. Creatures so deadly that even adult Krillians avoided them. But Lisa was not here as a tourist. After months of careful negotiations, the Krillian High Command had agreed to a cultural exchange program. Human scientists would study Krillian society in return for sharing human medical knowledge. Lisa was the first human to ever set foot on the Krillian homeworld. Her escort was warrior scout Tishka, a young Krillian female who had volunteered for this unusual assignment. Tishka was smaller than most Krillian warriors, standing only 10 feet tall, which made her weak by their standards. She had watched the recordings from New Haven dozens of times, trying to understand the strange human behaviors. Follow close, human, Taishka said as they walked through the Krillian capital city. Many here have never seen your species. May challenge you to prove strength, Lisa nodded, looking around at the massive stone buildings that towered above them. Everything was built to accommodate 12-foot-tall warriors. The architecture was brutal and functional, with no decoration or beauty. It reminded her of a military fortress rather than a city where families lived. Where are the children? Lisa asked as they walked through the crowded streets. Tishka looked confused by the question. Children stay in training grounds until they prove worthy of city life. Many never return. What happens to those who don't return? They die, Taishka replied matter-of-factly. Only strong survive on Krill Prime. It has always been this way. Lisa felt sick thinking about children abandoned to die simply because they weren't strong enough. On Earth, communities work together to protect and nurture all children regardless of their abilities. She was beginning to understand why Krillian society had developed such a harsh worldview. They arrived at the research complex, where Lisa would be studying Krillian culture. The facility was run by Elder Scholar Morthok, one of the few Krillians who valued knowledge over physical strength. He was ancient by Krillian standards, his exoskeleton cracked with age, but his mind was still sharp. "Welcome, human scientist," Morthok said in careful English. "Your medical knowledge has already saved many Krillian lives. We are curious too. Learn more about your kind." Over the following weeks, Lisa made disturbing discoveries about Krillian society. Their rigid hierarchy based on physical strength had created a system where innovation was discouraged. Warriors who spent time thinking or creating were considered weak and demoted. Scientists like Morthok were barely tolerated and given few resources. "Your empire has incredible potential," Lisa told Morthok during one of their discussions. "But you're wasting half your population. Some of your greatest minds are probably dying in those training grounds because they're not physically strong enough." Morthok's eyes glowed with interest. "Explain this concept of wasted potential." Lisa showed him videos from Earth of Human. Scientists, artists, and teachers, making great discoveries and creating beautiful works. Many of these humans were physically weak by Krillian standards, yet their contributions had advanced human civilization enormously. "On Earth, we believe every person has value," Lisa explained. "A brilliant scientist in a wheelchair can discover cures for diseases. A gentle teacher can inspire generations of children. Physical strength is just one type of power." Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison was establishing more formal diplomatic relations with moderate Krillian factions. His ship, the Endeavor, had become a neutral meeting ground where humans and Krillians could interact safely. Engineer Danny Chen was working with Krillian mechanics to repair a damaged Krillian transport when disaster struck. A power coupling exploded, trapping a Krillian technician under heavy machinery. The other Krillians immediately began to leave the area, following their cultural programming to abandon the wounded. But Danny didn't hesitate, grabbed emergency cutting tools and crawled into the dangerous space to reach the trapped Krillian. Sparks flew around him as damaged systems threatened to explode again, but Danny worked steadily to free the injured warrior. "Human, why risk death for Krillian?" gasped the trapped technician, whose name was Velter. "Because you need help," Danny replied, continuing his work despite the danger. "That's enough reason for me." When Danny finally pulled Velter to safety, the other Krillian workers stared in amazement. One of them, Sub-Engineer Kexanal, approached Danny afterward. "You could have died saving him," Kexanal said. "In our culture, this is foolish behavior." Danny wiped grease from his hands and looked at the young Krillian. "Maybe, but in my culture, leaving someone to die when you can help is what's foolish." On Krill Prime, warrior scout Tishka was struggling with new ideas that Lisa's presence had introduced. She had been assigned to escort human teacher Kate Williams, who had survived the attack on New Haven and volunteered to come too. Krill Prime, as part of the exchange program, Kate had asked to visit the training grounds where young Krillians were, taught to fight or die. What she saw there horrified her. Children as young as 5 years old were forced to battle each other with real weapons. The weak were left wounded and alone, expected to either recover on their own or perish. "This is how we build strong warriors," Tishka explained, trying to justify what she was seeing to herself, as much as to Kate. Kate watched a small Krillian child, barely older than a human toddler, collapse from exhaustion during combat training. The larger children stepped over him and continued fighting. None of the adult trainers moved to help the fallen child. Without thinking, Kate rushed forward and knelt beside the small Krillian. She checked his breathing and pulse, then offered him water from her own supply. "What are you doing?" Tishka demanded, shocked by this behavior. "He's hurt and needs help," Kate replied, gently supporting the young Krillian until he could sit up on his own. The small warrior looked up at Kate with confusion. No adult had ever helped him before. In his short life, he had learned that survival meant fighting alone or dying alone. "Why help weak one?" the child asked in halting words. Kate smiled gently, "Because everyone deserves help when they need it. You're not weak, little one. You're just learning and growing." Tishka watched this exchange with growing internal conflict. In Krillian society, helping the weak only made the species weaker overall. But watching Kate's gentle care of the young warrior stirred something inside her that she had never felt. Before that night, Tishka found herself thinking about her own childhood. She had survived the training grounds, but barely. She remembered lying wounded and alone, wishing someone would help her, comfort her, tell her she had value beyond her ability to fight. No one ever had. She began to wonder, what kind of warriors might the Krillians produce if their children were nurtured and taught instead of simply left to survive or die? What innovations might their smartest minds create if they weren't abandoned for being physically weaker? Dr. Lisa Hamilton continued her research and made another shocking discovery. The Krillian Empire was slowly collapsing from within. Their birth rate was declining because so many children died in training. Their technology had stagnated because creative thinkers were discouraged. Their expansion had slowed because they had no allies, only conquered slaves who rebelled at every opportunity. "Your empire is dying," she told elder scholar Morthok during one of their private meetings. "Not from external enemies, but from your own cultural choices." Morthok was silent for a long time. "What would you suggest, human scientist?" "Try cooperation instead of domination. Try nurturing instead of abandoning. Try building instead of just conquering." "These concepts are foreign to us," Morthok admitted, "but perhaps that is why we need to learn them." News of these exchanges spread through both human and Krillian space. Young Krillians began asking questions that had never been asked before. What if strength came in many forms? What if helping others was not weakness but wisdom? What if there was more to life than simply surviving? On Earth, human leaders watched these developments with cautious hope. Admiral Rick Thompson, commander of Earth's Defense Forces, received regular reports about the growing interest among younger Krillians in human philosophy. Sir reported his aide, Lieutenant Nancy Foster, "We're getting requests from Krillian colonies for more cultural exchanges. Some of their younger warriors want to learn human cooperation techniques." "Interesting," Admiral Thompson mused. "Keep monitoring the situation. Something big is changing in their empire." He was right. For the first time in 3,000 years, the foundation of Krillian civilization was beginning to crack. Not from external pressure, but from internal questions about whether their way of life was truly the strongest. Path forward, the transformation had begun. The alert signals screamed across Krill Prime as massive black ships emerged from the void of space. High Matriarch Corvetha stood in the command center, her forearms working frantically at different control panels. She had not felt fear in 800 years of life. But the sight of these ships made her blood run cold. The Void Swarm had returned. The ancient enemy had not been seen for over 1,000 years. They were creatures of pure hunger, consuming entire star systems and leaving nothing but empty space behind. The last time they appeared, it had taken the combined might of dozens of species to drive them back into the dark regions between galaxies. "Many ships?" Corvatha demanded. "Scanners show over 10,000 vessels." High Matriarch reported War Commander Vexstar. "More are appearing every minute." The swarm ships were unlike anything built by living creatures. They looked grown rather than constructed, with organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with sickly light. Each ship was connected to the others by streams of energy, creating a massive web of destruction that moved as a single entity. On the planet's surface, the Krillian warriors prepared for battle in the traditional way. Each fighter would face the enemy individually, proving their personal strength in single combat. It was the way their people had always fought, and it had brought them victory across the galaxy. But this enemy was different. The Void Swarm did not fight as individuals. They moved as one mind, coordinating perfectly, sacrificing themselves without hesitation to achieve their goals. Against such an enemy, individual heroics were not just useless but dangerous. The first wave of Krillian defenders launched into space with confidence. Within hours, they were completely destroyed. The swarm ships swarmed them like insects, overwhelming each warrior through sheer numbers and perfect coordination. "We need a new strategy," War Commander Vexstar reported grimly. "Our traditional tactics are failing." High Matriarch Corvatha felt something she had never experienced before: desperation. The Krillian Empire was facing extinction, and their greatest strength was proving to be their greatest weakness. "Contact the humans," she ordered, the words bitter in her mouth. "Request immediate assistance." 3 days later, Admiral Rick Thompson arrived, with the largest human fleet ever assembled. His flagship, the Enterprise, took position alongside the surviving Krillian vessels. But Admiral Thompson had brought more than just ships and weapons. He had brought a completely different way of fighting. Admiral Thompson, to all vessels. His voice echoed across both human and Krillian communication channels. We're going to coordinate our attacks. No single ship acts alone. Every move must be planned and executed together. War Commander Vexstar struggled with this concept. Admiral, my warriors are trained to fight with honor in individual combat. How can we coordinate with your weaker ships? Admiral Thompson's voice remained calm and patient. Commander, your ships are stronger than ours individually, but strength, it isn't just about power. It's about using that power wisely. Trust me on this. The first joint operation was a disaster. Krillian warriors broke formation to engage in single combat, leaving gaps that the swarm exploited. Human ships found themselves protecting Krillian vessels. Its captains had abandoned their positions to seek personal glory. Warrior Scout. Taishka watched from her position on a Krillian cruiser as the battle unfolded. She had been thinking about the human concepts that Dr. Lisa Hamilton and Kate Williams had shown her. Individual strength meant nothing if the entire group failed. War Commander, she spoke up during a brief pause in the fighting. Perhaps we should try fighting as the humans do. Vexstar turned to look at the young warrior. You suggest we abandon 3,000 years of Krillian tradition? I suggest we survive, Taishka replied. Our traditions are leading us to extinction. The next battle would prove to be the turning point. Admiral Thompson worked directly with War Commander Vexstar to plan a coordinated assault. Instead of individual ships seeking glory, they would work together like the fingers of a hand. To all vessels, Admiral Thompson broadcast. Krillian heavy cruisers will form the spearhead. Human ships will provide support and covering fire. We move together, or not at all. For the first time in Krillian history, their warriors followed orders from a being they could crush with their bare hands. But Admiral Thompson had earned their respect not through physical strength, but through wisdom and tactical brilliance. The battle was unlike anything the Krillians had ever experienced. When a human destroyer was overwhelmed by swarm fighters, Krillian ships moved to protect it. When Krillian heavy cruisers needed precise sensor data, human science vessels provided it instantly. They fought not as separate species, but as one. Unified force, Dr. Helen Foster worked in the medical bay of the Enterprise, treating wounded from both species. She moved between human and Krillian patients, without distinction. Her gentle hands bringing comfort to warriors who had never known such care. Why save enemy wounded? Asked an injured Krillian soldier as Dr. Foster bandaged his wounds. You're not my enemy, Dr. Foster replied. You're my patient. We're all fighting the same war now. The Krillian warrior stared at her with new understanding. For the first time, he truly grasped what the humans had been trying to teach them. Strength came not from standing alone, but from standing together. Engineer Danny Chen found himself working alongside Krillian technicians to repair battle damage. The massive aliens struggled with the delicate human technology, while Danny couldn't lift the heavy Krillian equipment. But together, they could accomplish what neither could do alone. Human Danny teaches new way, said Krillian engineer Kexanol. As they worked, cooperation better than competition. Sometimes Danny agreed, passing Kexanol a tool, especially when survival depends on it. The decisive moment came when a group of swarm ships broke through the defensive line and headed straight for a human hospital ship. The ship was defenseless, carrying wounded from both species. In the old days, Krillian warriors would have protected only their own kind. But warrior scout Taishka didn't hesitate. She ordered her ship to intercept the swarm vessels, knowing it meant certain death. Her crew followed without question, understanding that some things were worth dying for. All Krillian vessels, protect the hospital ship, or Commander Vexstar ordered, his voice carrying across the fleet. Those wounded depend on us. For the first time in their history, Krillian warriors chose to sacrifice themselves not for personal honor, but to protect the weak and wounded of another species. It was a choice that would have been impossible before they met humanity. The sacrifice was not in vain. Human ships rallied to support the Krillians, and together they drove off the swarm attack. The hospital ship survived, along with hundreds of wounded who would have died otherwise. Admiral Thompson's voice echoed across the fleet. Outstanding work, everyone. This is what we can accomplish when we fight together. But the war was far from over. The main swarm fleet was still approaching, larger than anything they had faced before. Elder Scholar Morthok, studying the enemy from his research station, made a crucial discovery. The swarm has a weakness, he reported to the Joint Command. Staff, they are connected by energy streams. If we can disrupt those connections, we can break their coordination. How do we do that? Admiral Thompson asked. We need precision strikes on specific nodes, Morthok explained. But it requires perfect timing from multiple ships working together. War Commander Vexstar looked at the battle plan that Morthok had created. It was incredibly complex, requiring split-second coordination between dozens of ships. It was exactly the kind of strategy that Krillian warriors had always been taught to avoid. This plan requires absolute trust, Vexter said slowly. Every captain must follow orders exactly, without seeking personal glory. Admiral Thompson nodded. Can your people do that? Vexstar looked around at his officers. He saw warrior scout Tishka, who had learned to value cooperation over competition. He saw the young warriors who had been influenced by human teachers like Kate Williams. He saw the engineers who had worked alongside humans like Danny Chen. Yes, he said finally, we can do this. The final battle was about to begin, and for the first time, Krillians and humans would fight not just alongside each other, but as one unified force. The strongest Deathworld species in the galaxy was about to discover that true strength came not from individual power, but from the bonds that connected them to others. The final battle began at dawn on the fourth day. The main swarm fleet had arrived, a massive wall of organic ships that stretched across space like a living nightmare. Admiral Rick Thompson stood on the bridge of the Enterprise, watching the enemy approach. Beside him, War Commander Vexstar studied the tactical displays with new understanding. Remember, Admiral Thompson said calmly, we strike the connection nodes simultaneously. Every ship must hit their target at exactly the same moment or the plan fails. Vexstar nodded. 3 days ago, he would have scoffed at taking orders from a physically weak human. Now he understood that leadership came from wisdom, not strength. All Krillian vessels are ready, Admiral. We trust your guidance. On her ship, warrior scout Tishka prepared her crew for the most important battle of their lives. She thought about the human children she had watched playing together, helping each other, sharing their food. Today, her entire species would either learn those lessons or perish. Crew, today we fight not for personal glory, she announced to her warriors. We fight for survival of all, human and Krillian, strong and weak. We are one people now. Crew, once confused by such ideas, now understood. They had watched humans risk their lives to save Krillian wounded. They had seen human engineers work alongside Krillian mechanics as equals. They had learned that cooperation was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. Dr. Helen Foster worked frantically in the medical bay, preparing for the wounded that would come. Both human and Krillian medics worked under her direction, using techniques she had taught them to save lives regardless of species. Doctor, asked a young Krillian medic named Velsha, why do humans care so much about saving everyone, even enemies? Because every life has value, Velsha. When we save others, we save the best parts of ourselves too. Engineer Danny Chen was in the engine room with his mixed crew of humans and Krillians. They had worked together for weeks now, learning to combine human precision with Krillian strength. Today, their engines would need to perform perfectly for the coordinated strike to succeed. Human Danny, said Krillian engineer Kexanol, if we survive this battle, I want to visit Earth, see how humans live together in peace. Danny smiled. I'd like that, Kex, and maybe you can show me more of Krill Prime, the parts where families live. It's not just warriors train. The swarm fleet moved closer, their energy connections pulsing with alien life. Elder Scholar Morthok had identified 12 key nodes that held the entire network together. If all 12 were destroyed simultaneously, the swarm would lose coordination and become vulnerable. All ships, this is Admiral Thompson. The broadcast echoed across the combined fleet. To begin final approach. Remember, we are stronger together than we ever were apart. The human and Krillian ships moved forward in perfect formation. Human destroyers protected by Krillian cruisers. Krillian heavy weapons supported by human sensor arrays. Two species that had been strangers weeks ago now fought as one unified force. The swarm detected their approach and launched counterattacks. Millions of small fighter craft poured from the organic ships like angry insects. In the old days, each Krillian warrior would have charged forward alone to meet them in single combat. Today, they held formation and supported each other. "Target acquired," reported Captain Sarah Mitchell from the human cruiser Horizon. "Node 7 is in range." Node 3 locked on, called War Commander Drocketal from his Krillian battleship, one by one. The ships reported ready. The moment of truth had arrived. Success required perfect timing and absolute trust between species that had known only conflict for millennia. "All ships." Admiral Thompson's voice was steady and calm. "Fire on my mark. 3.2.1 mark." 12 beams of energy lanced out across space, each ship targeting its assigned node. Human precision guided the shots while Krillian power delivered the devastating force needed to break the connections. For one perfect moment, two species acted as one mind with one purpose. The results were immediate and spectacular. The energy web connecting the swarm ships flickered and died. Suddenly, the perfect coordination that made them so dangerous was gone. Individual swarm ships drifted aimlessly, no longer part of the terrifying hive mind. "It worked," shouted Lieutenant Nancy Foster from her position at the tactical station. "The swarm is broken." But the battle was not over. Though disconnected, the swarm ships were still individually dangerous. Now began the hard work of destroying them one by one. And this was where the new partnership between humans and Krillians proved its worth. Krillian warriors, no longer seeking individual glory, worked in coordinated teams to destroy enemy ships. Human ships provided precise sensor data while Krillian vessels delivered the crushing firepower needed to finish the job. Neither could have won alone. But together they were unstoppable. Dr. Foster worked tirelessly as wounded arrived from both species. She watched human and Krillian medics working side by side, sharing techniques and knowledge. A Krillian warrior held the hand of a dying human pilot, offering comfort in his final moments. A human nurse sang softly to calm a frightened young Krillian whose ship had been destroyed. "This is what we're fighting for," Dr. Foster whispered to herself. "Not just survival, but the chance to be better than we were." The battle raged for hours, but slowly the tide turned. Ship by ship, the swarm was being destroyed. Killing machine that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years was finally being defeated by something it could not understand. Cooperation born of genuine care for others. War-Commander Vexstar found himself fighting alongside Captain Jake Morrison, the human who had first invited him to dinner. Their ships worked in perfect harmony. Vexstar's heavy weapons clearing the way, while Jake's agile vessel provided cover and support. Jake Vexstar called over the communication link. "When this is over, I want to learn more about your human families. How you raise children together, protect the weak, build communities." Jake smiled even in the middle of battle. "I'd be honored to show you, old friend. You're always welcome on Earth." As the last swarm ship exploded in brilliant light, a cheer went up from the combined fleet. They had done the impossible. The ancient enemy was defeated, and two species had become something greater than either had been alone. High Matriarch Corvatha stood in her command center, staring at the debris field that had once been the swarm fleet. For 800 years, she had ruled through strength and fear. Today, she had watched her people save the galaxy through cooperation and sacrifice. "War Commander Vexstar," she called over the communication system. "Prepare a message to all Krillian worlds. Tell them the Empire ends today. The Krillian Commonwealth begins." Months later, Ambassador Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall on Krill Prime for the signing of the Terran-Krillian Alliance. The ceremony was unlike anything in Krillian history. Instead of displays of individual strength, it celebrated the bonds between peoples. Dr. Lisa Hamilton watched as Krillian children played with human visitors, learning games of cooperation instead of competition. These children would grow up in a galaxy where strength meant protecting others, not dominating them. Warrior Scout Taishka, now Ambassador Taishka, worked with human teachers to establish schools throughout Krillian space for the first time. Children who were not physically strong would be valued for their minds and hearts instead of abandoned to die. Engineer Danny Chen supervised construction of joint research stations, where human and Krillian scientists worked together. The innovations they created would benefit both species and countless others throughout the galaxy. Wardash Commander Vexstar approached Dr. Helen Foster during the celebration. "Doctor, I want to thank you for teaching my people something we never knew we were missing." "What's that?" Dr. Foster asked with a gentle smile. "That true strength is not what you can destroy," Vexstar replied, "but what you can protect and build." As the ceremony concluded, mixed crews of humans and Krillians prepared to explore the galaxy together. Krillians had retained their incredible physical abilities, but now they used them to explore and protect rather than conquer and destroy the strongest death world. Species in the galaxy had discovered that their greatest weakness was not physical vulnerability, but the inability to see beyond themselves. Humanity's gift was not superior technology or tactics, but the simple idea that strength without purpose was meaningless, and that the greatest purpose of all was caring for others. The transformation was complete. The galaxy would never be the same.